You're listening to Chicago Stories, a podcast from City Hall featuring the stories of everyday Chicagoans and special guests, as told to Mayor Emanuel.
This is Mayor Emanuel, Chicago Stories. We're here with sports columnist David Haugh. David, a quick question to start. Why is Chicago the greatest sports town in the galaxy? I don't want the United States or the
just
world.
galaxy?
Just to limit the space of what we consider.
You're thinking big.
Yeah, okay.
It's the people.
Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. You know, I do agree with that because I've lived here long enough to know what the people think of and how much it plays a role in their lives. Mm-hmm. You know, we're sitting here this morning, and it's after the first weekend of Major League Baseball. The Cubs lost 2 out of 3, and you think it was baseball Armageddon. Okay, so that's an extreme example, but you know, the highs and the lows. It's part of their lives. They place a lot of value in it. They spend a lot of money on it. They invest a lot of hope in it. So I would agree with that. I think that's what the passion, what people talk about all the time, and we write about it and speak about it. It's real.
Yeah, I kind of think politics is the other team in Chicago as a sporting event.
The 6th pro team?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly, the 6th pro team. But I also think, I mean, we wear like the 2 baseball teams and everything. I mean, you wear it on your sleeve. You
do. It's combative. Yeah. You know, I think from a political standpoint, you could probably relate to that. That's the fun part of being a fan in this town, whether it's the Sox versus the Cubs, Bears fans, like anything closely connected to the Packers. Yeah, there's a combativeness that is defines a Chicago sports fan.
There's no other, actually, I don't know of another sport fan that has a character on Saturday Night Live, the Chicago Bear fan.
I think you're right.
And so therefore it says something about our kind of culture as a sports town.
Yeah, when you've made it on SNL.
So now, give me the average day of it. So because I want to compare your schedule to mine as I'm looking for other cares post.
Yeah, well, that's what I hear. So you're always welcome on the Mayor Emanuel Show at the Score. So, all right.
I hear you have an internship open.
We do. Yeah, we might. You have to see your resume.
Yeah.
Last July, I went from being a full-time columnist and part-time radio guy to a full-time radio guy and part-time columnist. Mm-hmm. So I've been at the Chicago Tribune for 16 years. Mm-hmm. The last 10 as in the wake of the news columnist. Mm-hmm. I now start my day at 3 in the morning. I get up.
3 in the morning?
3 in the morning. So we're on the air at 5. Mm-hmm. Mayor Emanuel Show on the Score 670 Chicago Sports Radio. And then we're on from 5 to 9, 9:15-ish. You get off the air. Now, I will now write 1 to 2 columns per week for the Tribune, as opposed to the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. I was writing 5 columns a week in the Tribune. So depending on what I have to do those days, you'll figure out. I work out at the Prudential Center, figure out what I'm going to do that day, what I have to write that week. I have television commitments at NBC Sports Chicago. We do Sports Talk Live with Dave Kaplan once or twice a week. And
do you find the radio show more stressful or the column more stressful?
Writing's hard. Writing is hard, and I have found out
that... So it doesn't come naturally to you?
Well, I feel like it does, but it's still difficult. I mean, think about what you do naturally, and you do it well. You know, whether it's you're a natural leader or... Because if you're a natural leader, it still means you're going to have issues that come up. I mean, I find writing 800-word columns sometimes...
And being original.
Drudgery. Yeah, you got to be original. You don't want to be cliche. Radio's a lot of preparation. I think you can get exposed because on radio, as you know, I mean, there's no backspace key. So when you say it, it's out there. It's out there, and it's more lasting, and people can, and you don't have as much of a filter, maybe.
Has the internet and blogging impacted your brain in the sense that as you're writing, you're worried about, you can hear the counter reaction?
Yes.
So it's already...
I'd be lying if I said no. You totally are influenced by social media.
And it's already it's in your head as you're...
You kind of anticipate the reaction a little bit. Yeah. I think almost more so when you're on the radio, because you...
More on the radio than...
Almost because it's easier to... Okay, so... If I say something on the radio this morning about Yu Darvish being, terrible in his first start, I anticipate that we have immediately I'm going to see on the text line somebody react to that. So sometimes I will anticipate a reaction before you say it. So you kind of you couch it a little bit. Whereas,
so do you modulate yourself before you write one time and then you go back and edit and modulate it?
Yeah, I'm more of a, when you're writing, if you're not on deadline, I guess you're always on deadline, but we're not on like a nighttime deadline. You have the luxury of being a little bit more choosy with the way that you word something, and hopefully, and you should be more polished. My columns should be more polished than my radio show, without question, because that's just the nature of the immediacy.
How do you know you have a successful column? How do you judge it?
I think that's a really good question. You want to say based on sometimes the feedback, but sometimes the feedback you get isn't what you necessarily anticipate.
Have you ever gotten one where you were surprised at the reaction, meaning how strong people felt, and you said, I just typing that out and I didn't really see?
Yeah, I think that happens on Monday mornings of Bears games. Because you think like, okay, were we watching the same game? And then you will, in some cases, maybe not so much last year when they were 12-4, but there were some pretty lean years in the last decade or so for Bears football. And so you'll write something, and that's when you remember how passionate people are about the games that they watch. And you may be critical of something, or what I also have found, where you're not critical of something and you are supportive of an idea, people will jump all over you for not being more critical.
What do you think Coach Nagy has done right?
Created a culture that's conducive to winning, made people feel comfortable in their environment, built up the confidence, and changed the entire complexion of Hallis Hall. Whereas before, you'd go into Hallis Hall, and I could, as a media member, sports media member in Chicago, hold up the Bears as an example of how not to do something and how to maybe mismanage a crisis. He's come in and been himself, and he's been as authentic as any new sports guy in town that I can remember. And he changed the culture up there.
Give me, I'm switching around. Forget, you can even include current, meaning you can include him or Madden or whatever. Give me the 3 best coaches in Chicago sports history, regardless of sport. Okay. Or 5. You don't have to do it.
So George Hallis got to be number 1. Okay. I mean, the founder of the Bears. This is a Bears town. Right. As good as the Cubs are, all those things. George Hallis, the founder of the Bears, the patriarch of that franchise. He's number 1. Okay. Phil Jackson, just because of sheer numbers, you don't win 6 titles and go away quietly. And he's got a legacy of being, in terms of just sheer volume. So 6 championships makes Phil Jackson, I'd say, number 2. I would argue that Joe Quenneville being third with 3 Stanley Cup championships. Now, I know hockey is a niche sport, and it maybe doesn't resonate like the Bears or the Cubs in Chicago, but you got to give him his due. 3 championships in a salary cap era within from 2010 to 2015, borderline dynasty. Joe Quenneville's third. And then I think it's a really good debate. Then I think you've got Ditka and you've got Joe Madden. Ditka because he was a player here, because of,
rose up through the ranks.
Rose up through the ranks. He may be a bigger celebrity than Joe Quenneville, but Joe Quenneville was a better coach. Okay. So I think Ditka 4th, and then Joe Madden 5th, with Ozzie Guillen trailing at number 6. White Sox winning the World Series in 2005. Right. Ozzie deserves his due, but still, it didn't leave the same historical mark that the Cubs, ending their drought since 1908 and everything that comes with the Cub, mystique. Right. Ending that, I think, makes Joe Madden probably, he had a better overall managerial career than Ozzie Guillen as well.
So let me go, forget the big sports, baseball, football, basketball, hockey. Give me the unsung, unnoticed sport of Chicago.
Chicago Fire is largely overlooked and often ignored. And
worst real estate decision in American history.
Well, I know. Yeah, I wouldn't argue with that. I was just talking before.
But it's an emerging.
If the Chicago Fire had a downtown stadium and had property on the lakefront or somewhere in near proximity, they would not be dormant as a franchise, and it wouldn't be easy to ignore. It would captivate a city. There's a lot of soccer fans in Chicago. You asked me earlier about things that you don't anticipate. I covered a fire event, a couple of things. When I write about the Chicago Fire, and I haven't done it often in 10 years as a sports columnist, I am amazed at how many people are out there that I was unaware of. So if they would ever...
Let me break the cultural news to you. It's different than a hockey fan. Just in case you need help on this.
It's different. Yeah, it is different. Yeah, no, it is.
It's a whole different culture. It's a different fan.
And so if they could ever tap into that, I think they would find that there are people there. They just need a reason to go, and they would need to make it easier to get to. So the worst real estate decision in recent sports memory, I might quote you on that.
Look, Portland soccer team has more season ticket holders than Chicago Fire.
How is that?
It's a bit, I don't want to say, I had somebody who has battled both the Bulls, the Hawks, and the Cubs ownership. And we have never given...
You battled the Cubs ownership?
Just slightly. I don't believe in giving tax subsidies. I haven't done it. I think that's a mistake for cities and municipalities, and especially given you have battled on the issue of the property tax extension for United Center. And I think that in this case, they made a deal, and the fire is just out in the suburbs, and it's a warning sign to others who are thinking that I'm going to go to the suburbs.
Right.
It's
right.
just,
Not such a good idea.
No. It's not why DePaul wanted to come downtown.
Right.
This is the place you got to play.
Yeah.
In this city, in this boundary.
If you want to draw,
if
you
need that.
If you want to be relevant
for TV and
pro
otherwise.
Sports, it's all about relevance. It's all about the television contract. It's
what
all
about boxing and tennis?
I think that they're probably underserved as well. Boxing has an image problem, I think, in terms of it's hard to get sports media on board with a sport that involves punching people in the head. When you have the football, there's a football community of people that care about the sport that are concerned about people getting hit in the head. Boxing's got an uphill battle. So I think I
love boxing. My grandfather used to take us to over at the auditorium when they were two-ring boxing. My grandfather was a boxer.
Did you box?
No.
Did you ever? Well, I didn't know you tried.
Some people think that's how I do ballet, but no, I do not box.
You like to spar. I hear you like to spar.
I was actually surprised, to be honest, when I went after the Laver Cup, brought it here. I was surprised at the reaction. I mean, how big the city embraced that. This is also
Laver Cup was a success here.
Yes.
Yeah.
They were really happy.
Yeah, but again, I think because there are a lot of people that feel like their sports, boxing and tennis are good examples. When you do cater to those people, they appreciate it. Every time I've written a boxing column, but the boxing stories tend to be like these great stories that we're able to tell in this role. Like somebody an individual who was homeless, was living for a year, and then all of a sudden he's a Golden Gloves champion. The narrative of the boxer is compelling. The sport itself is hard sell to, hey, honey, let's take the two kids and go see somebody beating somebody else's brains. But they love the idea of what that represents to somebody because it's a way out.
So let me ask you a question. You're up in the owner's box at United Center with the Bulls.
Okay.
What do you tell them?
I tell them
how to turn the team around.
How to turn the team.
You just said that Phil Jackson, one of the great coaches of all time, 6 titles. Agree with you 100%. You're in the owner's box. And you're not going to write a column, but you say, okay, here's what I think you got to do.
To break the ice, I would say, can you find a way to rig the May 14th NBA draft lottery so you get Zion Williamson? Because there's one player in this draft that could change the direction of a franchise. He's it. But beyond that, I would say that you have some patience with the core that you have. The Bulls right now have 4 players, 25 years or younger, that they really are paying well to stick around. They have contract certainty. Be patient with this group. You have to. Nobody wants to hear that because everybody wants to get immediate success. Be patient with this core. Build around it. Don't be afraid to spend, and be open to the idea that this may be the right coach, but if it's not, you have to look at some fresh eyes perhaps. But I don't know that now's the time to do that. They switch coaches in December. You don't want to be doing that every year. So they're at the point in this rebuild. They just hit reset on the rebuild in December when they fired Fred Hoiberg. You've got to be patient now to go in this direction and see what the draft brings you, because free agency isn't the cure-all necessarily. The draft has to be for this franchise at this point.
So you have a situation where interviewing after the Elite Eight.
Yep.
Now, I go to the Final Four. Going to go again.
Minneapolis?
Yeah. My daughters and I, we've had this. And now this time they're in college, so they can't. They're the middle one's angry at me, like somehow it's my fault they didn't schedule it during spring break. What did you think of the Duke-Michigan State game?
I thought that Duke should have gotten the ball to Zion Williamson once at least in the final 3 possessions. Michigan State, here's what I thought about that game. It's a shame that was a game in the Elite Eight to decide who goes to the Final Four. That should have been the final game.
I went to my favorite bar to go watch it. When I thought that was I said I have to go watch this game because this is the championship.
It is a championship, and it should have been. Yeah. And Michigan State should not have been a number 2 seed. Everyone complained at the brackets, oh, Michigan State, they got a bad draw. They have to face Duke. No, Duke got a bad draw. They had to face Michigan State. They were the number 1 seed. Michigan State should have been a number 1 seed. Gonzaga probably shouldn't have been. So what you saw when in the regional final was the NCAA final, which is why I think Michigan State will end up cutting down the nets.
That's right. Okay. Were you surprised at the UNC? Were you surprised at Kentucky?
I was surprised that North Carolina and Kentucky did not get through.
Right.
I think Auburn figured out a way. They've maybe caught lightning in a bottle. Virginia has gotten past his demons and benefited from some unbelievable luck in beating Purdue. You just don't have a final
Were you
fight.
surprised at the Purdue?
Purdue kid was great. Carson Edwards, 42 points. He carried his team.
I actually think they went to him at the end when he ran out of steam.
He was, you can see that.
I mean, that's a long. I mean, they had him on.
Yeah, but that's what happens when you have one player and four other guys. Nobody took more than 7 shots.
60% of all their points came from one player.
Yeah, that's a little too much. I felt bad for the kid because he's a great player. He's going to be good in the NBA. Virginia, though, look, they got knocked out last year. They made history in going out to a 16 seed. I kind of like their story. They're the only 1 seed left, but I do think Michigan State's going to be too good for them.
Were you surprised at how many 1 seeds went down?
I was. I didn't expect. I certainly didn't have that in my bracket, which, like everybody's is kind of ruined right now. But I like the idea. I went into the Sweet 16 thinking and saying on the radio, I missed Cinderella this year. I missed the Cinderella story. You didn't have one.
None.
But the games in the Elite Eight level were so good, you didn't need one.
This is the first time. I mean, I don't know. I'm looking forward to the Final Four. I think the Elite Eight this year was at a different level than past years.
I do too. And I think that's partly because
how many? I think more games went to overtime.
I think more games went to overtime. They certainly Duke struggled with Virginia Tech before they got ousted. I think it was a product of not having an underdog, a double-digit seed. There was one double-digit seed in the Sweet 16, and that was Oregon. So you saw a higher caliber of play, more competition, and better games.
How did the term March Madness come about?
It's from Illinois. I think it's from the IHSA. Way back in the 1940s, I believe, adopted it for their tournament, and then it was kind of introduced to the NCAA lexicon sometime in the 70s, and it just went from there. There might be some money to be made. I don't know. Don't
you think that college football misses out? I know they have all the bowls, but not having this kind of why? I'll tell you a funny anecdote. Ready? I'm going to go in something else about March Madness. So we're on Obama's first trip. We're overseas, so we're hitting like 8 countries. And we're in Turkey. And I'm going to mess up the religious designation, but the Greek Orthodox Church head in Turkey, Ankara. Now, remember, we just met with the head of the king in Saudi Arabia. We met with the President Mubarak in Egypt. We're meeting with Chancellor Merkel. We're meeting with President Gur of Turkey, Erdogan, the Prime Minister, etc. We sit down with the head of the Greek Church in Turkey. And as soon as we sit down in this very, very important meeting, and he goes, Mr. President, he goes, yes. He goes, how are you doing on your bracket? And you meet with all these, and Obama lightens up. Yeah, totally. I'll never forget. We're sitting there, and he says, "I've been following your bracket." He says, "You look like you're doing." This is the head of the Greek Church worldwide, and and he knew that Obama. And it was we were over our first trip overseas, and he knew about Obama's bracket.
And was he really into it as much as everybody said he was? Like
Obama?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean, there was presidential security briefs every morning, and then there was the bracket. Okay, but the Greek, the head of the Greek church,
that's the guy who did his research.
Yeah, he knew.
Yeah,
he knew. He wanted to suck up, and he was, and he totally.
But that's a great icebreaker.
Yeah,
totally. Look, here it is. All these years.
Yeah, we had a lot.
You remember it. You know he does.
Yeah, we had a lot of foreign policy to do, of which we had to cram into 5 minutes because 40 minutes was about the bracket.
That's great.
No, but why is it that football doesn't have in college? Or does it, and I'm missing it because I'm not?
Here's what you're missing about maybe college football. In my view, I played college football, so I'm a little bit partial to that. College basketball is all about the tournament. March Madness is great and distinct and unique. College football, every week is a playoff. Every Saturday, starting in October, when Michigan plays Wisconsin in the middle of October, or when Alabama plays LSU in the first weekend in November, those are playoff games. Those are first-round tournament games. If you lose, you're done. You can't afford. So to me, that packs in every bit of drama and intrigue. In college football, every Saturday is a season. Every week is a season unto itself. So you have the build-up. You have the hype. That's what makes football a great storytelling sport. But it's different than college basketball, which is compressed into 3 weeks. To me, college football is spread out over 3 months. You lose on September 15th, you might be done. If you're Notre Dame, and you end September 4-2 or whatever, your season is
practically, totally.
Yeah, you're not going to be playing for the national championship.
Do you think college players should be paid?
I do think at this day and age that a stipend makes a lot of sense. If they could figure out a way to make it equitable.
I have my theory.
What's the theory?
Not my theory, my proposal.
What's the proposal? You know what? You're going to have some time on your hands. You might be able to implement this.
Here's the deal. So, I swim in the morning.
Yeah.
And you have to, so Lana and I were watching the game, and we were having this while we were watching the game yesterday before she left. You shouldn't pay the players, but each college player should select a not a family not-for-profit like the Emanuel Foundation.
Yeah,
No.
The foundation. Yeah.
Should select a not-for-profit, and their payment is that money goes to the not-for-profit for after-school program, for mentoring, whatever it is, and doesn't have to be in the city of the school, meaning you can come from some other state, and it can be a not-for-profit in that city that you grew up in. But rather than pay the players, and I don't think all the money should go to the university for the stadium and for all that. Let each player pick a not-for-profit or a charity that does some foundational work, so therefore they're getting some, not personally remuneration, but they are getting some way to benefit what they pick.
I like the idea. I like the idea of benefiting charity. Here's a question I would counter with then.
Okay.
So if you're a kid who grew up in inner city Los Angeles and you're the running back at Alabama and Tuscaloosa, and you're getting paid to your favorite foundation, but your parents can't afford to get on a flight and go from LAX to Birmingham. Why, if you have the money to pay the foundation and the charity, why wouldn't you give that directly to the player so his family can benefit and actually see him play, or just save the money because he is doing the work, as a student athlete, and the student and the school is benefiting from that student athlete's work?
I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah, and the difficult part is too. You mentioned swimmer. I know you like swimmers, and
I'm thinking I'm like
but I know, but every sport, every athlete is entitled to the same sort of. Swimmers don't devote any fewer hours than football players.
I would say more,
probably more. But what, the Alabama football team is going to generate more revenue than the Alabama swim team. But is there a fairness issue there in play? You can't just pay football players. You can't just pay male athletes.
No, I got it. So
it's a difficult, tricky proposition.
But my thing is, you shouldn't. These are kids.
Yeah.
It's going to get hinky. It already is.
It already is.
So bring it out of the shadows,
right,
but have it go to something better. Because I think the kids should learn. I mean, I'm saying this with 3 kids in college, to support something bigger than themselves.
I think that's a great idea, a great point of discussion. I also understand why people would look at the commitment and you look at the Final Four teams, how they're going to benefit. Look what happened to Loyola, just by basis their enrollment, their endowment, all these things. The donors, the giving.
Now it's unbelievably different.
And a lot of people react to
the
sports, the passion.
So I got a couple more questions. One is, we joked earlier on about sports and politics being another sport. It is interesting to me, if you go through history, how you have rugby when Mandela becomes president. Why sports is the unifier to create, and used in political processes to create unity or to make a national statement, as the boxing match did in the late 30s.
Why do I think that? I think it's because politics and so many different things are about like what your ideology is, and what you believe, and or how you're brought up and what you're raised to believe, whether it's your religious background or your political background. Sports is very visceral, so it's unifying because you're all Bears fans. It doesn't matter, if you grow up next to somebody and they're different race, ethnic background or religious background. You root for a team that brings you together. Everybody loved Walter Payton. Everybody it was easy to Michael Jordan, and Ernie Banks, guys like that, and Paul Konerko for the younger, Sox fan. These aren't about political ideologies or what divide us. Is what bring people together. Sports bring people together more than they divide people. And if they do divide people, it's not a matter of life or death. It's not a feeling like there's a divide that you can't bridge and something that is like, a deep wound. It's more fun. Sports are fun. They should be. Passionate, fun. Were
you surprised at the firing of Coach Q in the middle of the season?
Yeah, I was. I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. But you look at what they did since Jimmy Carlton took over. you have to give them credit. And I wrote a column. I said,
It was a courageous. I like Coach Q. It was a courageous move, though.
Good gutsy move. I thought they fired the wrong guy, but they didn't, and they turned things around again. I said we owe Jeremy Colleton an apology. I think that he's done a nice job for a guy who inherited a tough spot.
Do you think high school in Chicago will be, now that we have Phillips football, et cetera, do you think it will be more than a high school basketball? That's what we're known for. I
hope so. They need some regulation. They need some the talent's there.
Right.
They need reasons to. They need strong coaching, strong direction within the corporation, and they need to keep things, it's headed in a positive direction. The games need to be safe to go to. These are good programs with a lot of tradition, and the opportunities that are there for these kids, if they take advantage of them, are worth. That's what makes this worth preserving.
It's amazing to me how well known. We started the classic here in Chicago for the Chicago basketball. Chicago is a basketball high school juggernaut.
No question about it. You look around the college basketball, you look at the Chicago Bulls starting lineup. They brought up a kid, Walt Lemon Jr. He went to, I think, Julian. He grew up on the South Side. He takes pride in the fact he wears number 25. He wears number 25 because he grew up idolizing Derrick Rose at Simeon, and he goes back to Benji Wilson. And there's a connection, there's that tradition that means something to these kids when they grow up playing basketball in Chicago.
Cubs and Sox, where do you think the season goes?
I think the Sox are going to be, they're in the midst of the rebuild. I got them winning 72 games. I hope the weather's good on opening day. They have to show some progress this year that's not just intangible. Boy, they really play hard. They've got to start winning games. The Cubs, I've got them winning 92 games. I have them going to the World Series. I have them overcoming their bullpen issues, and I have them overcoming Yu Darvish. They have a lot of things to overcome, but I still have a lot of confidence in the fact that it looks like their offense is maybe fixed.
Chicago Bears.
Bears are going to have a more difficult time. The schedule gets tougher, but I still have them I think they can rebound with double-digit victories. I don't know if it's going to be 12-4. They're not going to surprise anybody this year. So it's difficult, as you know, as a politician.
Right.
When you are not the hunter, when you are the hunted.
Second time around is always harder.
It is. Sustaining success.
You're not
harder to stay in office than to get there.
You're not surprised anymore.
I think you know that.
Lightning round.
Okay.
Cubs, Sox.
Cubs.
Thick or thin pizza?
Thick.
Sears or Hancock?
Sears.
Okay. River or lake?
River.
You get a bonus point there. And 12-inch or 16-inch softball?
12. I just never got the 16-inch. I like wearing a glove.
You do?
Yeah, I'm just a glove guy.
You still play softball?
I don't. No, my arm's shot. My arm
What
is real
position
shot.
did you play in football?
I was a free safety. I played at Ball State for 4 years. Yeah, I was a
Did you
safety.
like it?
I did like it. I loved it. I was college football was everything to me. Yeah, I majored in football at Ball State. I tell a quick funny story. So I was wondering at the end of I had a good senior year. We were in Mid-American Conference. I was debating whether or not to chase the dream and go into NFL training camp or go to grad school at Northwestern in journalism. We played in the California Raisin Bowl. It was 2nd and 10 on the balls at the 14-yard line. They completed a pass. I chased the receiver the last 20 yards into the end zone on national television. At that moment, I knew I was destined for journalism. The NFL dream was over. Not fast enough.
So the end zone meant something different to you than...
Yes, it did. It did. Like, welcome to journalism.
David, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
All right, man.
Appreciate it.
You've been listening to Chicago Stories with Mayor Emanuel. You can subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts and tweet your guest ideas using #ShyStories. Thanks for listening.